And we are back on another episode of We Making It Woo. I would like to say that this is a weekly conversation around success so that we can create some access so that we can all progress. I am still working on this tagline, guys. Like, just bear with me. But yeah, if you want to know what success looks like in your 20s, just keep tuning in. So what happened last night? By the time you get this episode, what would have happened last night was that I worked so hard to get the episode out with Tatiana and Jasmine Hearn in light of what collective terrains you better had came and seen us. But yeah, so I was working on getting that together for you guys. It was so huge shout out to Jasmine and Tatiana for being so available and accessible. They have been doing some great work, and I was just really, really happy that they were able to fit a little bit of time on the schedule to get some really great questions. I hope you enjoyed that interview. It's a short one, and so if you haven't heard it already, please take a listen. I realized that in the last episode, I didn't tell you what I was reading, and I actually started a new book. I know that I said that I was reading No Ashes in the Fire by John Moore, but TBH, it's not funny yet, and so I just needed something that was a little funnier, and so I started reading Notes from a Chef by Kwame. I'm not going to dig in my backpack right now, but he is from New York City. He's a famous chef in D.C. I think his restaurant is called Kith and Kin, and before that it was Chat Bougeot. But it's a really, really funny book. His shout out to you, Kwame, if you ever hear this podcast. I'd really I think you're really cool so far. His voice as a writer is very comparable to my inner head voice. And so it's turning out to be a really, really great book. And also Questlove really approved of the book. So obviously I'm a huge fan of Questlove, so I got to read it. So yeah, as always, if you want to be a part of the conversation, be sure to email me. Guys, you should really email me. I mean, I guess you don't have to. You could DM me. But I just want to know, like, how you guys feel about the episodes. I love when people walk up to me and say, like, oh, Katie, the episode made me feel so good. But I'd still like it if you DM me or email me. Let me know if that takes too much time. It's all good. So we have been talking about so many things. In the last episode, we talked about collective terrains. We've talked about some immigrant artistry. Then before that, we had a couple series. So now we are going to segue back into our regularly scheduled programs, talking to artists about what they're making in light of an upcoming show. I'm so excited. And today I have a really, really, really special guest. Really, really, really special guest. Can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, wow, really, really special. Hi, I'm Nana Chinara.
Hey, Nana. So if you are not familiar with Nana, what are your pronouns?
I use she, her. They change often. Or that's not true. I use she, her mainly, but sometimes I'll mix it up and I'll say all pronouns.
Okay,
she,
cool.
her sounds fine.
So Nana, I can use she,
Nana.
her. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Nana showed an amazing solo at Work Up at Gibney about 2 months ago.
Yeah, it was March 15th, 16th.
Yes, Nana and I met through Community Actionist Works. For those who don't know, I'm a community actionist at Gibney, and Nana works for Day One, which is an organization that does...
partners with young people under the age of 24 to try to end intimate partner violence.
Yes, so we worked together through some assemblies that we've done.
Hands are for holding.
Yes, and then I want to say we did a training together. One of those trainings that you have to do in the beginning of the school year just to make sure
we did a meet and greet. That's what it was. It was a meet and greet for all of the educators and the performers.
There we go.
And I was like, hi.
Yes.
And then I saw you on the train.
Because Nana
Emily
lives down the street from my house in Prospect Lovers Gardens. Also, guys, Emily and I are moving, so if you know of any places, just let me know.
Yes, I hope it's in Flatbush because we need neighbors.
Oh my gosh, she totally wanted to be in Flatbush. But I digress. So that's how we met. And now you have an upcoming show.
On May.
There we go.
Monday, May 13th at Judson.
Which is in about a week.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about where you are as you're preparing for this show?
That's an excellent question. So I am performing the same work that I performed at Gibney that you saw,
Yeah.
Workup 5.3. It's called, the specific section of it is called She Looks at You,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a part of a larger body of work called Haunts.
Mm-hmm.
And I am also just stepping into some fellowships and residencies right now, so I am currently kind of jumping back into that work for the first time since March.
Wow.
Because I've took some space and time from it, especially because I've been developing a lot of other projects on the side.
Yes.
Um,
Which we will talk
which
about.
we can get into, yes. And so I haven't been performing, or rather, in April I spent a lot of time performing with other people.
Yeah.
So I was in Maria Ballman's show,
Right.
and Nigel Whitson's show.
Yeah. Shout out to them.
Yes.
Yes, Maria will be in the show this weekend.
Yeah.
And
I'm coming to see you.
Yes.
On Friday.
Yes, and thank you. And then Naja I know through Joya Powell. So shout out to both of them.
Yeah. So I did a lot of March. After March, I was really depleted. So I didn't really do anything. And then in April, I did a lot of performing and collaborating with other people in small roles. And so May, it looks like me jumping right back into that process, especially because I have these 2 fellowships and residencies.
Yeah.
So I am kind of interested in re-looking at the project or in fresher eyes,
Mm-hmm.
but also with a deeper reverence for the work. When I did the performance in Gibney, I thought that it was going to be the last one of that particular piece. Haunts consists of 2 segments. One, the first part is She Looks at You, and the second part is called Is My Soul Dragging My Body, or Is My Body Dragging My Soul?
Mm-hmm.
And they kind of bleed into each other.
Mm-hmm.
And in its fullest iteration, that is an hour-length, evening-length show. And it has arrived. Let me tell you some of the history of the show.
Yes, actually, that was going to be my next question.
So last year, Dixon Place, I applied for the Hot Festival.
Yeah.
For a one-woman show, evening length, and I had no idea what I was doing. I mean, I had no residency at that time, ever. Gibney was my first residency. No one was giving me space. Like, I completely produced and directed the show myself, an evening length solo show by myself.
Was that your first time?
Yes.
That was your first time performing your own work?
No.
Okay.
But it was my first time performing my own solo work.
I see.
And I had performed my own work a little bit here and there in CPR, Center for Performance Research's Fall Movement Festival.
Yeah.
With a collaborator, Aya Clark.
Yeah.
And that was my first time choreographing on other bodies. And that was called Baptism, Black and Bald. It was about being black, bald, and queer.
Yeah.
And so that happened in 2017, fall of 2017, and then all of a sudden in the summer of 2018, Dixon Place had given me a spot in their Hot Festival for queer artists.
Yeah.
And it was a solo show. And so I then kind of created my own residency, not really residency, but I produced that show on my own. So that looked like me renting space. Shout out to Mark Morris for that and their nonprofit rate.
Yeah.
Writing a show myself, producing a show myself. I hired some my collaborator Muse Dodge. Shout out to you, Muse. She co-directed some films for me that were in the show. Yeah. And that is where I developed. Oh, I'm lying. Whoops. That is where I really developed my work. But I was also in Brooklyn Arts Exchanges needing it. And that was happening at the same time. And that needing it ended around this time last year, actually, in May. Yeah. And that is where I developed the first 5 minutes of She Looks at You through that program. And then I just flew from there into the solo show for Dixon Place. And so what I'm working on now, Haunts, is kind of some segments and pieces from To Bear the Rose. My show at Dixon Place was called To Bear the Rose, a visual memoir. So I'm taking some pieces from that and I'm developing it even further into Haunts. And To Bear the Rose is going to transition into a book and film project, actually.
Okay. So tell me a little bit about what inspired She Looks at You, because that's where you're going back to for this upcoming show.
Judson, yes. Inspiration. I feel like my inspiration, a lot of it, I'm interested in this concept of self-intimacy, of growing close to myself, as a means of healing.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if inspiration is the right word for She Looks at You, because it is a conjuring of pain. It's conjuring my experience with intimate partner violence as a way to process it and to live with it. And for me, movement and performance is literally like my way of processing and living and liberating myself and healing myself.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times I'll have experiences and I'm like, oh, this is going to be a show in 5 years.
Yeah.
Which is just on my honest way of like dealing with myself and also loving on myself. And so She Looks at You came from a need to tell this story of me experiencing intimate partner violence in a queer relationship, in my first real relationship, my first time falling in love, especially because those moments, that like year and a half that I was in that relationship, has really shaped a lot of who I am now, and also has created moments within myself that really need some excavation. I really need like some looking at. Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about how do I want to phrase this question? So from my perspective,
you've seen the work.
Yes, I've seen the work, but that's not what we're going to get into just yet. I'm thinking about how performance acts as a space of healing and liberation, given that you're being witnessed and you have only control over what you're coming into. I find, or at least I want to better understand how the process of being witnessed creates space for liberation and healing. I really want to see if we can put some words to that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question, actually, because I've made a lot of shifts with that. When I first performed this work, which was created this time last year, so it's fun to be in full circle.
Yes.
When I first created this work, in my creation and in my process was very healing and liberating, but performing it was not. The first time I performed it, there was a moment of feeling really special of being witnessed by my community.
Right.
When I performed it at Dixon Place particularly, it was my whole community, like everyone who like loves on me and who had the opportunity to make the show, who was in town for it. It was after 4th of July, it was July 6th.
Yeah.
It was healing, and also I was understanding that I was being witnessed, as in I was performing. And so the perfectionist in me, the Virgo in me, came out, and I wasn't present. I was also really depressed at that time. Yeah. So it was really difficult for me to really be present in the story that I was sharing, beyond the fact that it was a story.
And you feel like being present then gives way for the healing and the liberating?
I think so.
Whereas if you're not present, maybe you miss out on that moment
for me, yes. I feel like if I'm not present, I am very much occupied in making sure this turn looks like this and making sure that I'm enunciating and all of these things versus getting lost in the work. And I performed that work again. I performed it at Cracks of Light at Gibney, actually, in October, I believe, for Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And it was the same sensation of being preoccupied with performing. Yeah. And it was actually, Workup was the very first time that I was able to really be in the work. And that was how I realized that I wasn't done with the work. Right. So I think that for me, a lot of the healing and liberating comes with the process.
And the process being like being in the studio day in and day out,
writing about the work. I have a deep writing practice that comes with my work. Yeah, I have a journal for every piece of work that I'm working on. Yes, and so I kind of create little agendas for myself for the rehearsals, and also I reflect on what the rehearsal felt like for me. Yeah. And those moments were really healing for me. The process of having space and having someone pay you, really. Shout out to residencies, give me more. Right. To be able to sit inside of yourself and research. For me, my performance is also a tool of research. To research what it is that I'm feeling and experiencing. Right. And how I can conjure that out of my body, how I can express that. Right. That is where the healing comes in. And I think it's tricky, actually, to find the healing in the actual performing. Right. And then I think it needs to be a container. And I think that's what's tricky about performances, is that they are not a container. Anyone and anyone can just watch it. Right. And so for me, it's super important for me to have the first witnesses of that work and to be people of my community, or people that people of my community. I think if I've been considering possibly taking on haunts when it becomes a full-length show on a tour.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I would need a lot of grounding in my community first, having witnessed and holding that space for me and me holding that space for them before I can ever really transition into taking that on to be witnessed by other people who don't know me and who I don't know.
Yeah. I think that point is so important. To just to dive into, because I personally think that oftentimes as a young performer there's this push and advocacy from teachers, from mentors, etc., to leave it all on the stage and use that as a space to really be vulnerable. And I think I am hesitant only because I'm like, why do I need to be vulnerable with you? Like, I don't know who you are. However, I have found, especially with Jasmine Hearn's work, that the process of even acknowledging where vulnerability sits on stage is an opportunity to, like you were saying, do research on my relationship with vulnerability and how I can sit in vulnerability comfortable enough to enjoy this performance for myself, but also give someone some energy that maybe they're looking for too. Yeah. But it's such a it takes time. And what I am also curious for you to talk about too is, given that you weren't present with those two performances, do you feel like those performances were the practices that you needed to give you the space for Gibney to be what it was in terms of vulnerability and being able to seep into it and not be so preoccupied with the perfectionist elements of it?
Yeah, you said a lot of things. I'm going to touch on that first, and then there's something you said about I forget, being vulnerable in the moment and having people witness you. So I think I definitely, I'm not sure if I needed those performances. I don't know if I'm framing it as a need for myself, but I do think, I think that those performances were really instrumental, in practicing the work. I think I needed time. And so I think those performances allowed me to be engaged with the work over time. And so I think that is really instrumental in engaging with the work over time. So I guess I do think those experiences definitely informed my process for sure, because it has allowed me to display the work and then change the work. And it also has allowed me to be engaged with the people who are watching it, because after performances or post-performance talkbacks or discussions, and those moments really stick with me. And I'm surprised each time, because each time I feel like my work is very personal to me and my experience. And I'm also, for me, because of the work being personal for me, I'm creating it for myself, and then I'm creating it for my community. But first and foremost, I am creating it for myself. And I think that is really tricky as a performer, because you are performing for other people. So for you to be creating work for yourself and to have meaning for yourself, it's tricky, because then it needs to be performed, right? And so you need that buy-in from other people, right? In order for, I guess, does that mark how successful you are? Is a question I have as a performer for it to be seen. But after I performed those pieces, no matter how not present I was, someone was really present with my work,
right?
And that ties me back in and reminds me of why I am doing it for myself. And also, I remember several people after the first couple of showings came up to me and were like, I really felt that this was my exact experience.
Right.
And it wasn't around a queer relationship necessarily. It wasn't around, someone talked about their sister and experiencing alcoholism, their sister experiencing alcoholism, and seeing so much resonance,
which is it's completely different from what you were operating.
About their best friend,
it's
just completely different scenarios, and yet the exact essence and feeling was captured.
Right.
So that definitely brings me back.
Right. And I also think that that's a really amazing point too, that though you felt preoccupied with all these other things, this person is as seeped as you've been, despite where you may be, and that's really, really amazing. That's the ticket.
I think so, and also, so particularly for She Looks at You, when I originally was thinking of it, there's a section at the end. Here's a sneak peek, or I won't give away a sneak peek, but there's something I do at the end of the piece, at the very end, that for me calls the audience in.
Yes.
In a very demanding way.
I think I can think about. I think we'll talk about it out
there. Yeah, there's something that I do at the end of the piece, and that moment, it's the way I engage in eye contact, I will say, and the way I engage in eye contact for me at the end of that piece, is really me actually seeing who's looking back at me during this entire performance, because I'm really just seeing lights and darkness while I'm performing it.
Right.
And there's a section where that changes. And I do that particularly because I do think that there is a large privilege in being able to attend shows and witness work, right? It's really special. And also it's a privilege of witnessing what someone else is creating and not having having the experience of what the performer is doing, right? Because it is labor, right? Performing is labor, and witnessing it is also labor, but it's a different kind. It's also a privilege, and also you're getting a gift. No matter what performance you're viewing, you're receiving a gift,
right?
And so that was my moment of calling people in, and not necessarily making folks complicit in what my story is, but also saying you've witnessed this now, and you can't get away from witnessing it, right? Because it is now not just my story, you've witnessed it, and so there is some responsibility there.
Yeah.
And I'm not quite sure what that responsibility is, but for me, a lot of times, what I really want for people to take away from my particular work is for people to look at it and then apply it to themselves, apply it to their lives,
right,
and see where they fit in and how they can grow from those places.
Right. Which is totally what I think about a lot with the podcast. I think I'd hoped really just to talk to people, but I just remember sitting in my bedroom when I first moved to the city, and wanting just to know more about who I was about to see, or like who I'd already seen, and I'd hoped that someone in their bedroom could use these conversations to not only be inspired to create whatever they want to create and do whatever they want to do, but to almost have like multiple blueprints. Because at this point, guys, I don't know if you guys know, but I think I'm on episode 18.
Yes, congratulations!
So thank you. We're trying here. We're making some things happen, but I love that someone can listen and take what they want. They don't have to listen to a full episode. They don't have to listen to all the episodes, but they can take whatever they want and they can apply it.
And you're a podcast also, and looking through all the various kind of series that go on, there's a lot there. There are a lot of conversations that I mean, sometimes we have to pay to have those conversations. Like sometimes we have to be at a conference or at a training for dancers, or at a workshop that we paid for in order to have the access to that, and also have access to know that you're not alone. And so I want to just uplift you in this moment, and thank you for creating this space for other performers, no matter where they are in their stage.
Right.
Because I think that is really special, that what you're creating, and also allows people to engage with it on their own ways and on their own time.
Yes.
And not have to pay to be in a workshop about it.
No. Well, and I think comparable to your point, going to see performance is a privilege, not only in terms of like having to pay for a ticket, but in terms of like scheduling, in terms of like, it takes time to do this other thing. Performances aren't at your beck and call the way that this podcast can be. Like, I post it on a day, unless you're like, Katie, you need to post every day. And I'm going to be like, girl or guy or person, look. Maybe, but not today. Not today. So yeah, as I think comparable to what you were saying, access is so important. And coming from Texas, where I feel like I didn't get to access all things equally, I always want to just give somebody something that I didn't have. And I think that just speaks to what you're saying in terms of the performance, that no matter how you received it, you did receive it. And what you do with it, like you said, I don't know where the responsibility falls, but how, like, what you do after that is totally up to you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's like one of the beauties about performance. So in a way, I hope that the podcast is it's kind of like a performance. But speaking of performances, one thing you did mention earlier that I really want to talk about is residencies and fellowships. How did you finance, pay yourself? How did finances play a role in this creative process?
I'm really bad at that. Really bad. For the original buy-in for the work, right? When I first created with Bax, we got, I think we received $100.
Okay.
And also we were gaining a lot, and so that was awesome.
Gaining a lot in terms of
it was a workshop,
right?
So meeting weekly. Heather, I'm forgetting your last name. Heather Maria Ox, I think that's how you pronounce her last name. She's a theater artist. Taught the class. And it was originally Dan Fishback who created the class called Needing It. And so it's a workshop that you have weekly, and you're in this community of queer artists. And that was really excellent. And so financing wasn't a thing because the performance was really small. Mm-hmm. And I had my costume pieces. It was great. Then when I did it at Dixon Place, a couple months later, I was completely out of pocket, and I maybe spent like $1,500.
Damn.
I mean, I hired
and this was
stage manager. I hired,
and this was just out of your own pocket. You have another job.
Out of my pocket. This was
you
out
work
of
at
my
day
job.
one.
I'm transitioning out of day one, and at that time I was working there full time.
Right.
So this was completely out of my pocket, and
right.
I did not get paid a lot at all at Dixon Place for that performance. So it was out of pocket. Right. Completely out of pocket. And yeah, it was like $1,500 between renting all the space that I rented out for performance, between collaborating with the film director, my friend Muse, between my stage manager, Morgan Johnson.
And also shout out to you for paying your friends.
Yeah, of course.
Just like shout out to you. Once I just want to really press that. Like you paid your friends.
Yeah. And also the photographer, my piece has a lot of photography in it, or the fullest version of it had a lot of photography in it. Kaylin Jacobs, so paying her for the photos, it was a lot of funding, and props and all that, and transportation. Yeah, it was out of pocket, and I'm not doing that again.
In terms of you're not going to do that again, you don't want to spend that much of your own money. I'm not going to
spend that much of my own money. I will not. And that is a hard boundary to set for myself. And it also makes me really dependent. And that's really scary. But because I've received support now, I'm like, oh, okay, like this is what this feels like. I need more of this. Right. And that doesn't mean that DIY work is not going to be done by me, because I think that's really important. Right. But that means that not to that scope and scale of $1,500. Right. And then not paying myself any thing.
Right. But
but I do think that the investment was worth it for me,
of course. And also explain why it was worth it for you.
I think it was worth it for me because I have the experience of completely producing something by myself. Right. Which is huge. That is major. Huge. I mean, a lot of people, it's the other way around. Like you get the institutional support and then you produce something by yourself. Right. So I have a deep reference for fellowships, residencies, whatever, because I didn't have that when I created that work. And also, I also know what I'm capable of. I mean, I was 21. The institutional support that I'd had up until that time was Center for Performance Research's Fall Festival and Dixon Place and Needing It from Bax. And I had that's nothing. My resume was nothing. And I had performed, and I had jumped back into performance. I took a hiatus. And I jumped in performance back. And so my entryway into performance was in 2017 when I was in Nicole Shante White's Another Goddamn Lesbian movie, which was a choreo poem. It was excellent. And I was a lead role in that, one of the lead roles. And after that, so my resume was nothing. Like literally I had nothing on my resume. So it was just huge for me. It's a huge deal for me that I was able to create that space and make that space for myself. Right. Having not even knowing what institutional support could look like because I didn't have it. Right. So I think it was a huge feature for me to be able to do that at 21 in my first year back into performing, my
Of
first time ever creating a solo, evening length show. That was wild.
Yeah, and I also hope that that's encouraging to anybody out there that's hasn't, even if you, I think sometimes, especially with dancers are, I think, are so, or performers are just so multi-talented that I sometimes, at least for me, I know I get nervous about like, oh, I produced this thing, but somehow I don't think I can produce this other thing because somehow they're not related when they totally are. But yeah, just go for it, because I don't know if you guys know this either, but I had a web series. It's called What's That Step? You can find it on YouTube. There are 5 episodes. I had to pay for all of the filming. I had to pay for space when folks canceled. I had to pay for space when folks were there. I had a look that I was going for. Those props had to be bought. The time it takes to edit footage. Your girl was just out there. And even with the podcast now, I gift, like I said before, I gift all my guest books, at least those who want one. I buy them water every episode. These ventures do cost. And I actually don't know what institutional support looks like for a podcast. So listeners, if you know of anything, shout out to Rebecca Fitton. She actually did send me something. But yeah, institutional support is great, but it is in no way a barrier. And even if you decide to create a boundary for yourself that, like, I'm only going to work with institutional support, I hope that you can find inspiration from both of us to just know that, like, if you want to make it happen, y'all, the podcast is called We Making It. Like, we is making it. We claiming that we making it. We making it happen. And we making boundaries after we make the shit happen. Like, we are always making things happen.
And I think it's something to know when you need institutional support and when you don't.
Right.
So I will not create something of that large scale, definitely not an hour-long solo show, probably without the support, because I think I have it. But I think I'm in the midst of, like, I think that folks can and should, if you have the burning passion, and not even if you just want to do something, do it, right? Because I'm also in a denial period of just getting straight rejection letters from all the things I've applied for. Yeah. And that's been really tough for me.
Of course.
And my partner, Jordan, the other day was like, you need to just make your own residency. And was like, you need to have your practice in whether or not you have space or not.
Right.
Like, you need to maintain a practice, because then when you get the space, then how are you going to know how to engage with it if you don't maintain a practice? And that is a huge shift. And my friend Nicole also said the same thing to me.
Yeah.
So creating your own residency or your own process, or just making sure you have your own practice, institutional support or not, is super important. And that is something I'm learning for the first time right now. And my friends Nicole and Jordan really, like, seep that into my brain.
Yes. Which, this isn't a perfect segue, but it's something I definitely want to talk about. How have you maintained wellness, whatever that means to you, throughout this process? Because we ain't out here, if we are making it out here on empty tanks, I want us to talk about it. But if we are working on full tanks, and anything in between. But all that to say, yes, how are you maintaining sanity?
Wellness. Wow, you're so timely. It's also Mental Health Awareness Month. Shout out May. It's Mental Health Awareness Month.
Oh wow. Yeah, I gotta make sure I really push this question this month too.
Yes,
okay, cool.
Which is great. Because yesterday I started reading a book. I started reading Emergent Strategy. I'm so late to it by Ada Marie Brown.
It's huge.
Shout out to Pleasure Activism as well. That came out as well. And I've had that book for literally like a year and a half. I haven't read it. I've had it for so long. And it's my first book of 2019. Can y'all believe it? I own so many books. But anyways, and I don't read them. It's a problem. But anyways, wellness. I'm doing a really bad job of that, to be honest. And I am starting now, May, actually. So it's crazy that you asked me that. Yesterday was like, I'm doing my routines, Virgo. But a huge shift for me has been leaving my job. Okay. I used to work full time at Day One. I'm consulting for them now, and my end date is in the end of June. I'm really excited to leave, because I know that for me, I have so many ideas, and having a full time job for me is impossible with balancing everything else. I don't have time for myself, especially as a performer, as a creator, as a maker. I was spending a lot of my time not doing those things, or doing those things in a different capacity, but not in the capacity that I wanted to do. So for me, I think the first step in wellness is making sure you have time for it. And so I'm really excited for the summer and for the following to have more time for myself and to myself. And I'm excited now that I only work part-time doing that. So I think making time, I can really tell you my plan. I think it's harder to tell you what I'm doing, because I think the main shift that I have been doing is shifting from full-time to part-time. Yeah. And in that just means that I have full days to dedicate to my work. But it doesn't mean that I've been taking care of myself while making the work. I have not. I think creating a journal for each work is a way of maintaining wellness and a way of like engaging in reflection. But my plan is to engage in a daily writing practice, to read every day. As those are things that inform my work. And also, I think this is a huge challenge. But I think to try to move my body every day, whether that is 5 minutes or 3 hours or 4 hours. Yes. And therapy. I have a great therapist. So weekly therapy is a huge way of maintaining wellness for me. And also prioritizing rest. That is something that I did not do. And I'm currently doing it now. I have a bedtime and I have a morning time. I try to go to bed by 11 o'clock, which makes me a grandma sometimes, but I don't care. Because I think prioritizing rest and sometimes leaning into rest is huge. Yeah, rest is radical. And it's hard to do when you're a performer maker using your body. Yeah. I don't know who told me that. Rest is radical is not my quote, guys. That's totally from someone else and I can't think about it. Also, huge shout out to Talkspace. For those who don't know, I've been using Talkspace therapy for How We Live Today for about 2 years now. Wow. So I can't even say it enough. And also I wanted to offer that Jasmine Hearn also has a huge writing practice. If you remember, guys, from the first episode with Jay Bowie, which was like back in December, they talked about how they have a huge writing practice too. So you're not alone. And Rebecca Fitton, shout out to her from episode 2, did a whole creative exploration embodied practice of walking. So you are definitely supported. Also, I don't know if y'all know, I walk a shit ton. Like I walk as if I live in Texas. I don't walk as if I'm a New Yorker. So just to kind of like help you put it to numbers, I walk from Prospect Lefferts to Bed-Stuy all the time. It's so fun. It's one of my favorite walks. It's a beautiful walk. I grew up in Bed-Stuy. I'm from Bed-Stuy. Yeah, so it's a great walk. I also love walking from Union Square to the bridge. And then if I'm really feeling myself, I'll walk all the way down Broadway and then I'll walk over the bridge. You know what I've done over the summer? One of the best walks ever. Shout out because we both live in Flatbush. Flatbush. From Brooklyn Bridge Park. It's such a long walk. Yeah, to walk to the house? From Brooklyn Bridge Park all the way over there. Like I've walked literally across the bridge. Yes. Through Brooklyn Bridge Park to the other side and taken Atlantic down to Flatbush and walked all the way home. Yeah. Through the park. It was Prospect Park and it is amazing. It's like 2 hours maybe, but it's so nice over the summer. If you run it, guys, I think it's roughly, because I've run from our house to... I've run from our house. So I live right there in Prospect Lefferts off of Flatbush. I run from Flatbush to Gibney, 280. Wow. And that run is approximately 6 miles. So if you run it, it doesn't take 2 hours. Just for those of you who want to just give it a try. How long? I think I did it in like an hour and some change. Uh-huh. It's not a long run. And I'm hoping to get back to running. But I say that to say, to that, I also walk a lot as just a way to process, as well as journaling, and all the other people journal too. So you're definitely supported in that way. So before we get up out of here, you have to tell everybody about all these other things that you're doing in addition to this performance before we give a plug. Yes, and because I've been naming residencies and fellowships, I'll just name the ones that I have. Too. I'm a Lime Fellow. Hey now. So I'm creating a performance called Black Breath, which is a title from a work that I've curated actually last year. Yes. And so that performance is going to be in September or October in the Garden. And I also just got Shea Bushwick. Hey now. Jonah, congratulations. Thank you. Jonah Bouquet Arts Foundation. And so I'm working on Is My Soul Dragging My Body Dragging My Soul, the second part, Haunt. So if you see me on Monday, on May 13th, and you can also see the second part, or how that piece transitions And my performance date is, I believe, July 24th and 25th.
Yes.
Or 23rd and 24th. I'm also a Moving Towards Justice fellow with Give Me Dance.
Shout out to Moving Towards Justice. Yes. Is Jill Sigmund over that? Is Jill Sigmund like the big person for that? Like,
no.
Okay. Sorry, Jill, but shout out to Jill.
I think they're doing some work with Community Action, which is like the overhead.
Shout out to Cara. Shout out to Yasmin. Yes. Shout out to Emily, my boo.
I'm working directly with Cara, Yasmin, Joy, and Gina.
Yes.
And
shout out to Joy. Shout out to Gina. Hey, everybody.
It's ridiculous. So I'm creating a performance company called Chinara Rituals, which is a solo performance company currently, which is cool. Because I'm primarily a solo artist. So yes, I am creating a solo performance company.
Yeah.
Working with it. But through that, I'm creating a program called Healing the Black Body. And it is a movement-based fellowship for Black queer youth.
Yeah.
So currently in its current edition, it's for Black queer youth between the ages of 16 and 21.
Hey now.
We have, it starts this weekend on May 4th.
Yes.
And it ends on June 22nd. So on June 22nd, come to 890 Gibney. We're in Studio 3 from 2 to 4. Yeah. You'll see the work of these artists. So they are engaging in this fellowship that has components of Black feminism, movement, memoir, meditation, community building, and storytelling. And so the goals of that program are for them to define healing and liberation for themselves, to create to make a creative practice that does those things, and to also make a performance and to grow as self-determined leaders of their own lives. Yes. So I'm leading these young folks, not really leading, but I'm sharing space with these
facilitating
young folks.
Facilitating an opportunity. Yeah.
For them to do those things in a container, and then they are going to perform in June, and I'm trying to secure grants and things like that for that program to really, really grow. That's really what I want to dedicate a lot of space and time to alongside my performance work. Yes,
yes. And where can the people find you?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram at Nana Chinara. You can also find me on, if you're interested in the program or just want to know more information, ChinaraRituals.org. Chinara is spelled Chinara, rituals.org.
Yes, and if you're listening to this on an app, just rewind it and listen to it again. Any last words before we get up out of here?
I just want to thank you again for creating this space and having me.
Yes. Shout out to Mike Brunn and Kuhu Verma. Mike composed my awesome theme song. Kuhu is the vocalist for said theme song.
It's beautiful.
Yes. So shout out to them. I know sometimes I forget. But as always, guys, I want you to make it live. I want you to make it breathe. And even if it gets difficult to make it and you're feeling like this is like not working, just continue to make it, because as always, I just want you to make it. Bye, guys.